Hello, Rachel.
Hi, Ryan. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing very well. I'm excited, Rachel. We're back again, talking B5, and I'm very keen because we've got one episode after this for season 2. This is the penultimate episode, second last.
That it is.
So I'm keen to get things happening here, but could you please go over the usual stuff we do to inform everybody of who we are and what we do here?
Who are we?
Yeah. Who are you, Rachel? Who are you, Rachel? Please, who are you?
Well, the two of us.
Wrong. Just start zapping you.
Unacceptable.
Unacceptable, Rachel.
Unacceptable to speak before you're introduced.
They can read the title. They know who's here. It's Sebastian, everybody. He's here. No, we'll get to you in a moment, strange voice in the distance and the long twilight struggle.
Okay.
So you were saying who are we?
We are the Yum Yum.
Yeah, we are the Yum Yum.
We
are
bring
the world.
the Yum Yum.
Go on.
Why did I agree to ever do this to myself?
Well, you signed a marriage license, and that really sealed it for you. That was the nail in your coffin. The wedding. That was the nail. No, Rachel, you're flustered. We'll just get it over. Yum Yum, because of an iconic and momentous line of dialogue from Star Trek Discovery, hit us so deep that we had to name ourselves after it. And because we are naming ourselves after it, and every week, every episode, we reference Yum Yum, it's spreading to the general population again. Because there are people who now just say our podcast as a regular phrase. And isn't that hilarious that there are people out there who refer to our show as just, oh, the Yum Yums or YumYumPod? We have made people think and have in their brain Yum Yum. One of the most absurd moments I've ever seen in a modern television show, in which a character who we don't know very well licked her lips, flicked her hair back, and said Yum Yum as a reply, with no sense of irony. It was supposed to be sexy and funny, and it was just, there you go, and we adopted it, and we're talking about science fiction TV in a rewatch capacity, so that does mean spoilers, and we're talking about it in the context of the whole thing, not just an individual episode. We're here to talk about Babylon 5, and we brought a guest, somebody here who's going to put us in a room, shine a spotlight on us, and really interrogate our values. Somebody who's a bit close to myself physically in the room. They're close to me. Bartek. Hello, how are you doing?
It really warms my heart to hear you talk about the Yum Yum in the world, of people associating it with you, because you said that it made them think. Yeah. But what you really did was you did a psychological thing called classical conditioning. Okay. You've made them associate Yum Yum to you. Mm-hmm. And that
is good?
Is good. It is part of my art. Hello, everybody. I am interrogation expert Bartek. I am back for another interrogation episode of Babylon 5.
Bartek, your name does have art in it.
The art of interrogation.
Bartek of interrogation.
The Bartek of interrogation. I could interrogate you guys right now.
But let's interrogate you for a moment. Who are you, Bartek, and what do you do? That's a sequel question.
I am a man with a fire in my heart. I seek to inform myself as well.
Wow, wrong.
That is the type of acceptable answer that you are looking for.
Hopefully.
The type of unacceptable answer you're looking for is, I'm just a podcaster from Melbourne. I host a podcast called Spit and Polish Presents with my friend Ryan, who calls me Baby Boy Bartek sometimes.
Yeah, I do call you Baby Boy Bartek sometimes, and I haven't done it in a while, so thanks.
Yes, and we do a show, Spit and Polish Presents, Pictures Powwow, where we review a film every week.
Yeah, films that come recommended. We've done a large swath, and many films, whether they be big or small, whether they be ones we do for that main feed show or a monthly show, have had Babylon 5 actors or production people or whatever involved in them at some point. You've come on the podcast already before in And the Sky Full of Stars. So people, if you want to hear the full context of Bartek's journey with B5, check that out. But to go over it just briefly, you hadn't seen or heard much of the show at all outside of me bringing it up. And then over the course of the lockdowns, I gave you some of the episodes, and you eventually got to checking it out, and then before you knew it, you've watched all of it.
Yes,
Season 1 took you a little while to get through, but then Season 2, you just pulled the trigger, and I think in like 2-3 days, you watched like every episode and would message me cryptically funny things, and I knew instantly what episode. Like, one time, I was sitting by myself, it was like 9:30 at night, and I get a message from Bartek saying, I saw a moment of perfect beauty, and I laughed because I knew instantly what that was in reference to in Babylon 5, in which Kosh showed Sheridan a moment of perfect beauty, which was just, here's a weird little alien singing in some rags.
Yes, and I think I even said in that episode in The Sky Full of Stars that a couple of days prior to recording, I just finished the show. So I was very freshly done with it at that point.
Yeah, freshly done.
Freshly done. Freshly baked.
Now you're back again, and we're here to talk about a Season 2 episode. So if we can get the description up for this, Bartek, we've given you the DVD description for Season 2, Episode 21, Comes the Inquisitor.
Yes. Episode 21, Comes the Inquisitor. Jakar rallies the Narns on the station to uphold the Resistance effort against the Centauri. Delenn undergoes a tortuous test of her allegiance to Kosh by a bizarre emissary called Sebastian, open bracket, Wayne Alexander, close bracket.
Thank God you closed that bracket.
Full stop.
Rachel.
Yes.
We ask a question here. I can't remember. Did we ask this when Bartek was here last? But
I don't know.
Who here had YYE, Yum Yum Energy, which means who in this episode do you think could have said Yum Yum if this was
yes, you did ask
updated
this.
and written by Star Trek Discovery writers? Rachel, I'll pitch it to you first. Who do you think?
Sebastian is my main contender. One of the other Narn, when they're listening to the message, is my second pick.
Yeah, it's kind of tough not to just go with Sebastian straight away.
He's a clear choice.
He's probably going to win this, but I just want to give a special shout out and a little nod to Kosh.
Oh, Kosh.
Kosh appeared in one scene, which is really weird when you think about it. There's this moment where Linnea's like, please, could you stand up to Kosh? And it's like, you're expecting him to go to Kosh, but no, he just goes straight to, like, Sheridan just goes straight to the Inquisitor. He, like, skips the whole step of seeing Kosh. Kosh wasn't here that long, but he just was delivering that YYE energy. I just got that feeling from him when he said that ridiculous line where Delenn asks, how will I know who the Inquisitor is? It's like, you will know him if you survive. It's like, no, you get to physically meet the guy. You get to know him really quickly, actually. You'll know if you survive.
But you'll know that he's Jack the Ripper.
I don't think she found that out, so it doesn't matter.
Bartek, you know John told her later.
It was funny to me that Jack the Ripper / Sebastian was constantly referencing specific religious earth things, and I was just thinking, does Delenn know about Job and the whale?
Jonah.
Jonah and the whale.
He didn't,
what does that mean?
He uses that.
Well,
he uses that, but she didn't know the word but. She didn't know the word
this
but.
This is a show where she doesn't know the word but.
But of course she knows about Jonah.
Yeah. Well, Mbryo are fascinated by other cultures, right? So there's a chance she'd know biblical references.
There is a chance.
I was going to give the runner-up thing to Mr. Chase, actually.
Good answer.
Yeah.
With his voice.
Because, again, much like what you said with Kosh, he appeared in one scene, and it's been a while for me. He never appears again,
Nope,
does he?
that's it.
He's just this one scene wonder with this very specific delivery of lines.
And look.
And he plays...
He went for it.
Yeah, and for most of the scene, he really plays Jakar. He's like, yeah, we're doing this on my terms, this kind of thing.
I don't think I don't have any sympathy. I'll knock 10% off.
Things are getting very tense out there. Right now, it's a seller's market. But don't ever let it be said that I'm unsympathetic. Knock 10% off the top.
I'll just briefly go over my history with this. I remember watching this episode and thinking it was quite fascinating because the Vorlons were now getting involved in the story more. They were always this thing on the outside, and at this point in season 2, we're building up the Army of Light, we're knowing what the war against the shadows is in some context. The Vorlons are now a part of it. Oh, Kosh is a part of this army, and now he's sending this Inquisitor character, and it was very exciting that the episode opens up with, now the Vorlons are going to send somebody over, and then they send a human guy over who's like this 18th century, 19th century looking weirdo, and I was just so fascinated by it. And there's many things I can say more. Obviously, the Jack the Ripper stuff is what is prevalent about the episode when one thinks of it, but to me, when I think back on this as well, I always think of the really sharp, beautiful cinematography and lighting of the episode. There's lots of spotlights, lots
Emmy
of use
nominated.
there you go. And lots of use of shadows and the set design of circles and spherical images and all that. I thought, when I think back on this, outside of the twist reveal, I think of those visuals. I think of those visuals over and over and over again.
I've thought about the room that it's taken place in, ever since watching it the first time.
Grey 19, which is 2 above Grey 17.
It's actually grey. It's actually Grey 20, to be fair.
Is it Grey 20? As I say, Grey 19.
It's 19.
Well, but secretly it's actually Grey 20.
Oh, yes, you're right. Yeah, I was going to say, because Grey 17 is missing.
Yes.
So technically it's one up. You're right.
Well, there is a Grey 17, but it's actually Grey 18.
It also reminds me, because we just did recently, the room, it also reminds me similarly, and it's probably because it's the same set, but of where all the Markhab died, where they all secluded themselves in that area.
Lurker's Guide notes that it was meant to look similar to evoke that kind of sense of doom.
Oh, there you go. What about you, Rachel? What's been kind of your dynamic with Comes the Inquisitor?
I forget how good the episode is because the Jack the Ripper stuff is what I end up remembering. But I'm like, it's a really, really good episode. But it's just like, it's just so goofy that it's Jack the Ripper.
Wow.
I mean, I guess the fact that when we were talking about Yum Yum Energy, we were mostly talking about who the runner-up was really kind of spells out what the main draw of the episode is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Sebastian.
The non-plot. Oh, yes, Sebastian.
The non-plot. Bartek, what about you? This, you watched this only within the last year, and you watched this, as I said, in a slew of episodes. You were just bam, 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 bam. And I don't really remember you talking about this one too much. It was just kind of like, oh, the Vorlons are weird. I remember that being a takeaway, but what has been your relationship with this episode?
Well, like you said, I've watched every episode once, kind of in a span of, I think it was like a few months.
Yep.
So there wasn't as much time for me to necessarily, take in and think about every episode too deeply. But obviously this episode kind of stands out because, the star is the guest that comes in, this character that kind of dictates the whole plot of the episode. Like I mentioned, the non-plot is kind of a joke, not because it's a bad plot. It's a nice plot. It's a good one. But this one really captures the attention. I mean, it's the title, Comes the Inquisitor comes, he takes over the episode kind of. He is an emissary of the Vorlons who, as you said, a mysterious, race.
Yeah.
And so we get a little bit of information on, just how long they've, just an idea of like the minimum of how long that they've been around.
Yeah.
Like they're at least as old as the 19th century.
And they're powerful.
And they're powerful, and they have interfered with humanity before space travel.
This isn't
everything.
the Prime Directive in Star Trek. They aren't afraid to just go around and fuck with people. Yeah.
That's kind of their shtick.
So this is one that did stick out because of just the sheer force of the guest character.
Yes, but as I said also, like, just thinking about the room that it's taken place, like, every time I think of it, I think of, oh yeah, I remember that room. There's like the 4 lights on the ground, Delen's in the middle, the guys in the background and the shadows. I remember the entrance.
Playing up the Grey Council.
Kind of imagery there as well.
That's a good point, yeah. And I remember the entrance exits to the left. Like, it was just very memorable. So I guess what you were saying before about, you know, the production elements standing out, like, that's something that, what's the red letter media phrase? The
brain remembered it.
The brain remembered it, yes, that's it. Whatever it was.
You remember, you remember.
You might not have noticed it, but your brain did.
Yeah, and the episode has lots of visual iconography that you're never going to forget. The cane hitting the ground and the silhouette of this top-hatted gentleman, and then the slow walk towards the camera and the reveal of he's a human guy and what's going on there. And then obviously when they're in the room, his shadow in the background walking, and that is menacing, and that environment, that space that they're in allows all of this, while some other areas of Babylon 5 you can't have that. So you have this special torture room, we call it, I guess, the special interrogation room on Babylon 5.
Yes, a room where you won't be interrupted.
But be honest, is one of the things you also comes to mind when you think of this episode is Jack the Ripper's in it? Because I think for everybody it is kind of, oh, the episode with Jack the Ripper came to Babylon 5.
Definitely after you've watched it, that's something you're going to remember. Like, if you cut out, 5 seconds early, maybe not as much, but yeah, you do. It is something that stands out. And watching it again, the fact that I knew where it was going meant that I could catch a bit of clues early on, or at least things that made sense. Like when the camera was focusing on the woman whose cleavage was really visible from up high, or she was low, high angle.
Yeah.
It was like, oh yes, and he's talking about immorality, people being dirty, and he was on a mission. It was like, oh, this is echoing things that Delen's going to talk about.
Yeah, that's a great point that I noticed as well is on a rewatch value, you're no longer tangled up in the figuring out what is happening, like the mysterious energy is removed, but what you're appreciating is the character work, because he has a very clearly defined character once you know where things go. Like his phrases and his cultural points of reference and his overall flawed ideology, you see it on the rewatch because you aren't focusing on what's this guy's deal, what are these questions about, is Delen going to be okay? You're not as focused entirely on that, so you can appreciate moments like him looking down at the civilians below and judging them.
Going, it's always the same.
Yeah,
it's always the same.
I feel like
chaos.
Yeah, I feel like the first time
Immorality.
I feel like the first time I watched it, I wasn't so much thinking about, what is this character's deal? I was kind of dismissing him a bit more like that character in season 1, the one who likes that drink, who's like the hour of scampering episode.
Yes.
The crazy guy. I was thinking like, Abbott. Abbott. He's going to be this kind of weird character that we're never really going to get a grasp on. But then when, the interrogation sometimes turned around on him, made him the center of this kind of, conversation.
Yeah.
Like, it showed like, okay, this is a bit different.
Yeah, it turned it back around on him. Let's go over the Jakar plot first, because it is pretty simple and it's pretty nice. Rachel, do you want to start us off? What's happening with Jakar in this?
Jakar starts off the episode on his soapbox, not a literal one, but he is proclaiming the dangers of the Centauri to the rest of the galaxy, noting that they won't stop with none.
No.
Appeasement won't work, people. You can't just ignore this. Then a human has a bit of a go at him, being like, shut up.
Shut up, dude. We're fine.
We're gonna be fine.
It's quite ironic on a rewatch, too, because literally the next episode is the one with Mr. Lance from the Ministry of Peace coming in to sign a non-aggression pact with the Centauri, in which he does the Neville Chamberlain. Finally, we will know peace in our time. Hammering in that kind of overall reminiscence of World War II prelude into World War II Nazism, where you have people like Jakar who's like, they're not going to stop here. They say they want a buffer room and all of that, but they're just going to expand more and more. And it's quite ironic that this is the episode before Earth comes in to then hammer even further in that kind of point.
And Veer is watching it and looking quite sad.
Yeah. that was great. I love that shot of V. It's one of my I really love the fluidity of the camera move there, because Babylon 5 is a big space, especially the sets. They're very big sets. You get the feel, and I really appreciate
the space
you get
in Knives of the Boss.
What, sorry?
You really get to feel the space of Babylon 5 when you go to the baseball arena.
Oh god, how Babylon 5 had a baseball diamond in one single episode where Sheridan was like hitting baseballs.
Oh yeah, that was a thing.
That only happened once.
Yeah.
There's so much room that can happen. There's also a place where you can enter Muay Do and have a good fight with Walker Smith. But no, I love that shot of
Grey 17.
And Grey 17. We go from Jakar and we pan up to that walkway area we also often see them at. And it also visually, it says in the audience's mind, hey, remember this place? Because then later, Sebastian and Sheridan go to that exact same place. But
yeah, so
they're setting up the geography. Yeah, exactly. But I love that it pins Veer in this episode early on, because he really isn't in the episode much, but he does have a very big scene later.
Yeah, this was an episode where I'm like, oh shit, this is the episode where that scene happens.
And that's a lot of B5 episodes where you go, oh, fuck, this is this episode with that scene in it. Where you go, oh, geez.
Yeah,
but
because
it
had
a very sad looking view.
Yeah, because it had been a while, like a few days before I watched it again, I went to like the wiki entry for this episode, just to have a little skim through it, just to see if I can remind myself of some of the context.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that part. I'm like, oh, that's this episode.
Yeah, and we'll get to that scene. So we move on from there, and Jakar then is trying to
get weapons.
Because in that previous scene, one of the other Nans comes up to him and says, "Hey, dude, we gotta have a meeting. This
like,
isn't
why are
working
you
out.
demeaning yourself in this way? We got places to be. We got weapons to buy." So then they go and have the chat with Mr. Chase,
who tickled your fancy. We can tell.
He really did tickle my fancy.
What did you think of that scene? Because as you said, you've only recently finished watching this, and this is a certain era of Jakar. Very different to where we finish off the series. So what was it like to see a scene like this on your rewatch?
I remember before I started watching the episode, I tried remembering, like, oh yeah, early in season 2, Jakar was, kind of brought down.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have the power anymore. And he had a lot of scenes where he was like, talking to people publicly. And the episode literally opened like that. I'm like, oh, yes, I remember this now. And when the plot later went on and it was, the one where he had to get the recording from Nan, I remembered that was an episode and he succeeded and it was a touching moment. So you really get a sense of him moving very slowly towards where he goes later on, where he's, kind of back in a higher position, bit more of a holy leader kind of guy, bit more willing to give peace a chance.
Yeah. But here he needs those weapons.
Yes, and also becoming good buddies with Garibaldi. I'm a very big fan of that friendship, and it's like kind of still blooming here.
I remember you were very much a fan of Garibaldi and Londo friendship, and then when this started happening, you're like, oh, okay. I guess Garibaldi's just moving on now to the other ambassador that I like.
I remember liking the Londo Garibaldi friendship, but it's just because it was a really likable friendship.
And then it ended sadly. Because Londo commits war crimes.
Yeah, and very bittersweetly too with the last drink that they had.
Yeah.
But then the enthusiasm of Jakar to the friendship was really what got me like, oh, he's really into Garibaldi. This is awesome.
This is awesome. But I love that Mr. Chase scene. What I really love.
Oh yeah, I avoided the question. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, no. It's all because it's all part of your rewatch experience. You're like being reminded of this era of Jakar where he's down, but you can see that he's got the incline to go up to be better, because you have several moments here where you think back to season 1 and how villainous he could be and how dismissive of things.
Oh yeah, the first few episodes in The Gathering, it was like, oh, he's the sitcom villain.
He does get a great threat in there.
with Mr. Chase.
Yeah.
Where,
and that really reinforces like the old
just
character we knew.
yeah.
They may find his body, but they will never be able to identify it.
Has the scene in like the courtroom where he was like, Nan will not be down forever happened?
Yes, that was literally the last episode. So this is right after
that's
they've
really
lost the
fresh
war.
then.
They lost the war and they're now oppressed. That's why this is all kind of happening. But yeah, the need for freedom speech. But no, Mr. Chase, I mean, I loved him. He was really slimy. What made him really work was the voice, but the intense close-ups between him and Jakar, where you have that lower down shot of Jakar, and I really love this. I don't know why, but it's the prosthetics, but Andreas Katsoulis' Jakar has his chin firmly pressed down into his chest, and it just gives him this hostile kind of...
It's like he's doing a Kubrick stare, but not necessarily doing like the head tilt down thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's this intensity and physical tension that he's giving to his body because it is unnatural.
Yep.
And he's inspecting Mr. Chase, and Mr. Chase is kind of, as the scene plays out, you see he does get unnerved by Jakar. He's just kind of like, ugh, this it's just so weird. But I love the detail of, we've set up in the show that the Nans would deal to anyone, and now the weapons that they dealt to Earth during the Minbari War, which Jakar would often lord over people in that first season.
Yeah.
And now being sold back to him at a higher rate, and he's indignant about it. He's like really upset about it. It's like, how could you do this? And it's like, it's a free market, baby.
It's a seller's market.
It's a seller's market, which is the type of attitude Jakar would have used in the first season. And now it's being used against him. And he's like, this is blood money, you know? It's like, yeah, it was blood money when it was the Minbari War too, but you still made it like this whole thing.
And the money he's buying the weapons with are also, you know, metaphorically called blood.
Yeah. Rachel, what did you think of this type of stuff going on with Jakar here? Because again,
I think it makes a lot of sense. It was like, yes, this is where Jakar is at. He's in this weird middle place between the calm and the chaos.
Why do you embarrass yourself like this in public?
They must know that our voice can still be heard in the streets in their sleep. We must keep reminding the others that we exist. We are still here. If they forget about us, then we are truly beyond rescue.
He needs to do something for the war because he's stuck on Babylon 5. And
he's still a leader within the Narn community, even if he is just a citizen.
And he still has to swallow his pride and ask for help.
Yeah, and that's one of his big struggles, is learning what the multitudes of leadership is, because he's still very much in that phase of, I need the bigger guns, and I need more of the weapons, and I need to strike back and armor guys to the teeth, and I don't have to negotiate. He's still in that phase in his journey, but he's slowly having to realize that there is support. And and we see this with the Via scene and mirror it to the Garibaldi scene. One of the major pains for the character of Jakar is people saying that they feel bad and not actually delivering on anything. Garibaldi delivers on something.
Of an apology without action.
The emptiness of an apology or sympathy without actual follow through in action is what's really getting at Jakar, because that's what he's doing in the hopes of him preaching on the station is people will listen and actually act on the things, like actually take a stand and do something. We've seen throughout the season when Delenn and Sheridan were like, we can't offer you much. We can offer you food for your people. And Jakar that was like a knife in his heart. He's like, I wanted more. And you have the Garibaldi scene where Garibaldi could be the security chief guy who's like, I'm an asshole, I'm not going to help you, and do I feel for you. But he actually goes beyond that. He actually provides support. He actually gives something meaningful. Instead of giving Jakar a problem, he gives him a solution in return, which is why that kind of scene works really well, especially when you mirror it against the Via scene, where Via just is, I'm sorry. And it's like, well, that doesn't do anything for me. Your sorry means nothing. I actually need actual, and from your people right now, it means zero. But what did you think of that kind of dynamic at play here with G'Kar, especially when it comes to him and Garibaldi? Because, like you said, that's a friendship you enjoy, Bartek.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and it even kind of mirrored this plot of like Garibaldi was also sort of testing G'Kar. It's like, I always leave a little room for disappointment, and you didn't disappoint me, so thank you for that.
Yeah, he's more optimistic than Sebastian is.
Definitely, Garibaldi, the most optimistic.
Yeah.
Most upbeat.
He loves Looney Tunes.
He loves one particular Looney Tune for sure.
Yep. Oh, yeah, he has his type.
What does Zach Allen call Daffy Duck?
The God of Frustration.
The God of Frustration.
The household God of Frustration.
Very despicable. Yeah, that was a really nice little scene because these are two characters who, even though they're not yet, those friends that we know that they're going to be, they know each other. Like, G'Kar immediately is like, Mr. Garibaldi, I know how you do your interrogation. It happens this way, then this happens, then you catch me, and then I'm stuck. So let's just skip right to that point and cut to the chase. It was a very fun little thing. Like, when characters are really aware. And the fact that we, the audience, look at it and it's like, yeah, that is what would happen means that, it's well-written
It's trust in the audience as well. Like, guys... You've seen this scene. We don't need to do this scene. You know this scene.
And that actually
we can skip to the more interesting part now. We've laid the groundwork. We can
just
go
get to
deeper
the meats
now.
of the discussion.
And that actually kind of leads me to another point that I was thinking about, more so in relation to the whole main plot and the Sebastian stuff rather than anything specific. But I mentioned already that in me revisiting this, I did have a slight... thing of, okay, let's try to catch up on, what the backstory is of this episode, what happened before this, so that maybe I won't get lost. This episode kind of just works on its own, like isolated in a weird way. It's I was thinking like, okay, so Delenn is being tested by Kosh because he wants to know if she's going to be, a reliable ally in the war, if she has the right beliefs, things like that, the war against the shadows, things like that. And a lot of those little elements are never, ever brought up in this episode. It almost felt like this very... I don't know if Lynchian's the right word, but this kind of... you're not going to understand everything, but you're going to understand the emotions and the types of actions at play.
And it might make sense because JMS is a big fan of Twin Peaks, and he had several Twin Peaks people, whether they be writers or actors, come through in the show. So I can definitely see what your point is there, definitely. Where there's an emotional understanding rather than like a literal understanding. Like, you get the gist of things from an emotional standpoint rather than being like, what is the Volon's technical deal? I need to know it this second now.
It feels like if this episode was just a standalone 40-minute short film or something like that, you could walk away being like, fan theories. Oh, what was this thing about? What is that thing about? But we know how, they emotionally ended, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But yeah, the Garibaldi helping out, it just brought a smile to my face because this is right after the Narn have been bombed back into the Stone Age, and then later in the episode when G'Kar has to get a message back home, he doesn't have those resources that were once convenient, so he has to lean on other people, and there's only the humans he can get reliable help from. Even though it's been small in the past, it has been there, and so him coming up to Sheridan and coming up to Garibaldi, basically having to, again, swallow his pride and ask for help from outside and hoping that it will work. He's gambling. He could lose his leadership, but he's willing to lose his leadership. That's the difference between someone like him and Londo. Londo's ambitious for power, and G'Kar was ambitious for in an emotional sense rather than like wanting to climb the ladders of powers. He was wanting the best for his people, whether he was clouded by rage, like wanting to exterminate a whole race of people, but he's always wanting the best. And if that means somebody else has to take my place, he's willing to do that, which again ties into Delenn having to...
Life is his purpose as well.
Yeah, the life of his people, the safety of his people, and so he has to swallow it up, talk to Garibaldi and Sheridan, and Garibaldi again helping out. Sheridan helping out. We've got these rangers here, and they've just got to go. We've got to start using these guys because we've set them up in the show and they actually need to do something right now. And so they help out in that regard. And we get the really touching scene of the family getting the message and everybody kind of reacting and looking at Jakar being like, you did it, man. You really nailed it.
I have a fun fact about that scene.
I'd love to hear it. I don't know. I know that a bunch of Narn aren't wearing red eye contacts because it's like they hurt. So there's just a bunch of Narns with just normal eyes. So.
One of the Narns in that scene is a CNN reporter that was doing a story on the makeup in Babylon 5.
Okay.
Oh, did they enjoy it?
I
Was that CNN reporter called Andrea Thompson who played Talia Winters? Because she left acting to become a CNN reporter. So was it her? Imagine if it was. That would be... No, it's too early.
That's almost as fun as the Louis Theroux thing where he was doing the porn thing and he ended up being in a porn as like a side character.
Yes, and he even did the whole porn auditions where he took photos and everything and then would like show them off to other porn actors so that he could get better interviews with them.
I just remember seeing it on the Lurker's Guide.
But, Via
Lando
turning away that desperate Centauri, saying, no, Lando can't help you.
Lando's not in this episode.
Yeah, he's had a little break. He committed some war crimes last episode. He needs a little bit of a lay down.
Now that I think of it, Lando's not in any of the interrogation episodes.
Maybe he's interrogating us, the viewer.
Maybe he's scared of me.
The Via scene. It's probably one of the best scenes Via ever has in the entire show.
Heartbreaking.
And he's the one who's... I mean, both of them are reacting a lot. There's very minimal dialogue, but what is happening there, you kind of never forget it.
No.
It's one of those things where, to go against something I just said, like if you know what's happened in the show up to this point, when you get that close-up shot of Jakar, like from Via's point of view, you know, like, oh man, we know exactly why this is awkward. And then even if you don't know the context, there is something going on here of like, oh god.
And the way that the shots emphasize that even more, like that, just that level of close up that's
and they're
just
already in
a
the lift.
little bit too tight.
And I think it was a little bit low angled.
Yeah, and like not quite fully an extreme close up, just tight. And it's like you're feeling the space and the confinement of that tube. And to do a reference to the last Best Babylon 5
There's no
podcast,
sexiness in that tube.
No sexiness in that tube.
When Garibaldi used to look at Talia's butt in that tube, there's none of that energy here. I really thought was a great detail visually is when we have those close-ups, we have the close-ups on Jakar. It's just all him. But when Via is in the shot and he's trying to turn away and not look, Jakar's in the shot too. He's also in the frame. But it's focused on Via, but you do have some of Jakar just peeking through the edge just because...
Really? I didn't notice
he's
that.
there. It goes full on to Via when he starts to walk away and says sorry, but when it's just the two of them
his presence
in
remains.
the elevator, you see when
after
Via...
it cuts away from Jakar the first time.
Yeah, when Via looks at it and he's just like, and it's just like... It's just... He's encroaching on Via's space, but he's just standing there, just looking. He doesn't need to do anything. He just needs to look, and you know exactly why Via's fucked.
Oh, well, that was if Jakar really is in the frame, as you say, that's just a bonus detail, because Via's acting puts Jakar in the shot, pretty much.
Rachel.
Yes?
When you first saw this, I mean, this is such a memorable scene. What was your reaction to it? Because... It's very, very emotionally intense.
I was like, don't pick on my baby Via.
So you're on hashtag Team Via.
Baby Via did no wrong. Baby Via's trying to do good. And then I was just like, but he is right.
Okay, so would you...
Like, the innocence that Via has of his inability to do anything, it needs to fucking go away.
So would you kiss Via on the left cheek or the right cheek? Need to remind people that I'm the interrogation expert.
Hey, she's my wife. I asked that question. Left or right cheek of the face?
Both.
Oh, there you go. One on each. So you're doing it all.
Which one first?
European style. Yeah, which one first? The left, because that's the wedding side. That's where the ring goes. No.
You answered 4, Rachel. Why?
Because I'm here.
You're Via.
I'm here too.
Via is here. I remember when I saw that scene, it really made me conflicted. I felt really conflicted, in a good way, because it is a perfect, as we mentioned, if you know what's happening in the show, you agree with both of them because you have seen Via stand up in the moments when nobody else would. You know that he feels guilt. You understand that he's trying to do the right thing here. But you also know Jakar, and you understand completely why this is just salt in the wound to him. And it's one of those things where both characters are coming at it from fully formed perspectives, and there's not going to be a win here. And it makes you feel bad. It really puts you in that room with them, in that tube with them, in that confined space in which you go, if I was Via, what would I do? But also, if I was Jakar, what would I do? And
you trust that JMS has a reason to put this here other than to be awkward?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes. Because, the scene is Via in the lift just casually going about his day being Londo's flunky, his lackey, doing all of the stuff while Londo's away, minding his own business, and then, bam, he's confronted with the realities of what his business is. In a lot of ways, his business is to fuck over and oppress somebody, and that person is right there looking at you.
A reality that he already understands, but now he's really gonna feel it.
Yeah. What about you, Bartek? I mean, what was your reaction to this when you first saw it?
I know that when it first cut to Jakar, my immediate response was to laugh. Not because I thought this was going to be a comedy scene, but just because, I know what this is. That
laugh of dread.
Yeah. Maybe at first it was a bit more lighthearted, but then once it cut back to Via, the dread was pretty much gone. Every little movement that Via does between that cut and saying sorry is you kind of get an idea of the thought process in his head. Okay, what do I do here? Okay, let's just look away, just minding my own business. We don't have to talk to each other.
He's still looking at me.
But then the guilt just comes at him and he doesn't know what to say. And again, I also was thinking geez, what would I say in that situation? And I asked myself that multiple times, okay, that won't work. And it just all comes back to apologizing for something.
Yeah.
And we understand the character. We understand that he legitimately did not approve of anything that his race did. And maybe if he phrased the apology in a different way, he would have gotten a different response, but it would all lead back to, I cannot forgive this.
Oh, yeah. And in Jakar's reaction, right, where he pulls out that knife and just cuts his hand, and every single drop of blood, he just says, dead, dead. And that delivery, that line delivery, that's why it's kind of when people ask me, who's your favorite, Londo or Jakar? I'm I don't know. I think of all this Londo stuff, but then I think of that kind of fucking amazing performance and line delivery from Andreas Kotsoulis with dead, dead, dead. And how do you apologize to them? And he's through gritted teeth and almost in pure rage, but also on the precipice of crying. He's then I cannot forgive, and walks away. And it's masterclass acting.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's the added thing of thinking back to this moment in the context of what Via does in faking 9 deaths.
I was about
to get them out, and it's just now he can apologize to those ones.
I was about to say, with foreknowledge of what comes later, when that scene ended, I thought of, Via smuggling the Nans, and I was okay, but he does eventually do something. So obviously he felt something.
He was informed by this scene.
Whether he was already going to do what he ends up doing or not, this definitely gave it a bit more of a push.
Yeah. I think it definitely inspired him.
I think this scene directly challenged him.
Take more action. Yeah. Because I really do think that in that moment, Via felt powerless to do anything about it.
Yeah. And he felt like Londo does. I have no choice in this.
I've made my choices.
I'm only a
I'm on my
small.
path.
I'm only a small player. I can voice my concerns, but he at that time, when Londo made the choice to get Mr. Morden, he said like, "Don't do this." But then what did he do? He proceeded to say, "Fine, Londo, I'll go send the message to Mr. Morden." He was still, in a way, it's kind of fucked when you think of the scene. Veer is apologizing, but we, the audience, know that Veer's blood, has blood on his hands too. He was the guy that sent the message to start the war against the Narn. Like, he's not clean. Veer, he has a soul.
He's compliant.
He has compliance. He has responsibilities in this too when we think about it, but we are so on Veer's side because he's such a nice character. And I was going to ask you, Bartek, too, since we've talked about this many times on the pod, when you have a scene like this, what do you think about it being applied to someone like Veer? Because, I mean, what were your thoughts about Veer up until this point? Because for me, it's like, oh, Veer's like that fun, silly guy who's sometimes like an angel on Londo's shoulder. But then you have a scene like this in which it's like, no. What happens if we put Veer in a really fucking dramatic situation? What do you think about all of that when it comes to this character?
There was one line he said in the middle of his apology, which was something along the lines of, I tried telling them or I tried stopping them.
But they never listened.
But they never listened. There was nothing I could do. I'm sorry. And that felt like very kind of a powerful kind of summary of what he went through before. Maybe to Jakar, that could have been, just an empty line trying to justify himself, or maybe he would have taken it at face value but thought not good enough. But because we are on Veer's side and we were with him through all of that, we know that he legitimately did have qualms about it. He was kind of coerced into doing all these things because Londo
he's still participating.
Yes, but Londo is a very pushy guy. Hey, come on, Veer, you need to become like me. And, there's...
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure on a guy. Like, again, back to interrogations. Like, if you push someone enough, eventually they'll straight up tell a lie just to get through the situation.
And how much of their integrity are they willing to compromise? Because he compromises his integrity, Veer, in those moments in the past, and he's going to and this moment, this scene here challenged him and actually made him think about where he's at. Hence, he does go on to actually not just stand by. He's not a bystander after this point. He actually starts to enact change. He actually starts to, not just with the Narn stuff, but when he eventually becomes ambassador, eventually becomes emperor, he actually starts to help others around him. He actually starts to be a part of the story. And it takes him to dark places. Eventually, he has to kill somebody himself, right? But in this scene here, when I look at it, I just go, wow, this guy who, when we first introduced him, he was like this big, fat, bumbling, idiot assistant guy. And
who was stuck on his like Game Gear, Game Boy thing.
And we've dragged him to this level of complexity.
I'm sorry. I wish there was something that I could do, but I tried telling them, but they wouldn't listen. I mean, they never listen. I'm sorry.
Some stuff happens in a dark room. People shout a lot and cry, but
there's some zappy. I think Pikachu.
It doesn't mean a lot.
Pikachu's in there.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if Sebastian
Ryan, why
said...
are you laughing? You watched the episode? You saw him?
Imagining he's the exact same, but he's got little red circles painted on his cheeks. and occasionally when he zaps the lead, he says, Pika Pika.
See, I thought you were going to say like he's got the cane in one hand and a Pokeball in the other.
No. He is Pikachu because he's zapping her. I love that. If it's the exact same image, but he's got little red cheeks, little red circles on his cheeks, and when he zaps the lead, he says he's an English accent, Pika Pika.
Where do you think that flame that goes after Sheridan came from?
From his Charmander that he threw down.
That was Ember.
Yeah. We got the interrogation side of this episode in which Delenn is getting tested by the Vorlons about multitudes of things, but her role in the war to come and where she fits in their grand plans.
Is she going to be the right person in the right place at the right time?
Yeah. So we've talked about an interrogation episode once before already on this podcast with you, Bartek. You mentioned in that episode that this is a trilogy almost of sorts of interrogation episodes in which a main character is put under the spotlight and tortured in differing ways, and this is obviously the second in that trilogy here. So Rachel, for you, what do you think about that idea when it comes to B5 and how it's implemented in this particular one?
I love it. Like, it's one of those things where it's just such a clear exploration of the thematic through line of the show, because the whole interrogation is revolving around what do you want and who are you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also appreciate as a step in a different direction.
And also the fucking performances.
Oh, yeah.
Just out of this world.
When it comes to stepping in a different direction in the same area, like in the same idea, because we've seen the Dark Void Spotlight British man torturing you episode, but it does differentiate from that one in many different ways. Of course, obviously, he's Jack the Ripper and the Vorlons sent him and they're deconstructing the hero narrative of Delenn, but one of the things that I really like about it is in twofolds. We've got we are being delivered the Vorlon ideology right into our veins, and we don't fully know it yet. And so on a rewatch, you're like, oh, yes, I get all this. But also, he enjoys it. The first interrogator, it was a means to an end. He wasn't delighting in pain and the infliction of it towards Sinclair. Sebastian is. He actually gets distracted at points from his own goal because he likes to hurt them. And that makes for a fascinating dynamic in the interrogation kind of scenario, because then we get the third one and there's a whole slew of different ways that one approaches it as well. But yeah, in that first, in Sky Full of Stars, it was a means to an end and also to deliver the Earth First ideology and to explore the character of Sinclair being involved. But here, we are also exploring the interrogator themselves.
In the first one, Sky Full of Stars, it was it Night 2 or Night 1?
Night 2.
Night 2. Night 2 came across like he wasn't really an interrogator outside of this episode. It was a means to an end, as you said. And he was mostly using the weird setting that he put Sinclair in to kind of get through it all. And he was also testing to see what worked. Like, he did try, the biting questions, things like that, but they didn't work. And then eventually he asked I think it was like a gentle question, and that made Sinclair think and try to recall things. And then he was like, oh, I'm going to latch onto this and ask gentle questions. And then what happened?
And he became like a guide, a companion in the journey rather than just a direct foe.
He was definitely a guy who was trying to work out, how am I going to get this information out? And he was easily overpowered, and, he died in the end. And that was first act of the 3-act interrogation trilogy, the newbie guy, you get a little sense of what's going to happen. And then the second and third guys, they're, the intense ones. And this one, the sadistic one, he's using, torture, and he's very effectively, I don't know if perfect's the right word, but it's one of the perfect ways to really make Delenn self-reflect, because if I'm remembering correctly, season 1 Delenn was all not so much like a Vorlon Kosh character, but
very mysterious.
She had her own ideology, and you kind of went with it. It's like, oh yes, well, I don't understand Mbryo, but I believe what you're saying.
They have secret agendas that we don't know.
Secret agendas, yeah, but the whole philosophy stuff about life and all that. And if I'm remembering right, in season 2, when she becomes half human, she's very quick to receive criticism from all sorts of people.
She's
all throughout.
kicked out of the council at
She's
this point.
kicked out of the council. I remember, wasn't there the news episode where like the news lady asks her a question and Delenn almost breaks into tears because she doesn't know what to say.
Yeah.
And she's just constantly being, attacked
And
philosophically and challenged the entire season, and she has to, remain firm. And then Sebastian in this episode puts her in a situation where, hey, if you keep doing these tactics, that's fine. But there is a real threat of death in store for you if you keep going this way and you do not satisfy the agenda of the interrogation. And he constantly reinforces it throughout the entire episode and really spells it out in a way that, like, when I was first watching, it was very confusing. But second time through, it's like, oh, yes, he is 100% aware of what he's doing. There's a tactic here. This guy is a master interrogator.
Yeah.
It's like, you say the universe is on your side. That means that you cannot possibly die here and you have no problem to keep acting the way you normally do. So why aren't you doing it?
Yeah, and Delenn often, her defense during all of these trials and tribulations that she's gone through is, there's a destiny for me. I'm chosen. The prophecy has said. And those are blinders. You have to actually hold yourself accountable as well. And you brought up the news episode. That was a great moment too, because in his interrogation, he asks her all these questions in which it's, the world is right. Maybe the world is right, and Delenn is wrong. Have you ever thought about that? And she has. Because of moments like the ISN episode, because of Naroon kicking her out of the council and basically saying she's an affront to their race and culture, because of all of these things, of course she would, but we haven't always had the chance to see her go through that. It's more, she reaffirms her faith in what destiny has laid out for her, what her role is, and we have someone like Sebastian coming in and saying, you need to think better than that. You need to think beyond that, because this isn't just about you. There's more at play here, but your role is important. But you need to straighten up here and actually take action of yourself, as well as retreating inwards to lineage or to culture or to the idea that you are going to be the key that turns this. And she does. She goes to a principle that many characters have. I was actually quite surprised because he wasn't in this episode, but the principle she has reminds me of Dr. Franklin, which is life. It's about life and the preservation of life and saving life. And she comes at it she does come at it from an understanding we have from her cultural value, in which if I die, another will take my place, and it goes on like that, which is a very Mbryo way of thinking, but she's coming at it from a wholly new way because of this interrogation moment here. Rachel, when it comes to the Delenn side of things, we've been enjoying Delenn in the back half of season 2 a lot more once she's been kicked down a peg or two and they're deconstructing
found herself a little bit more. Like, she's starting to find out who she is, not what she's expected to be. And I think her growing relationship with Sheridan is a big part of that. And we are enjoying that a lot more because she feels more well-rounded. And it's nice that she's been brought back down and that she's acting a lot more human in lots of ways. She's losing that prissiness, I guess, as being a Minbari in power.
It's a real big jump from the first interrogation episode, because that's the one where, it ends. It's like, oh, Delenn was there in the past that did something to my head. And throughout season 1, you had that whole thing of like, oh, are they secretly the villains? And, you liked Delenn, but you were kind of
could never trust her,
putting her at arm's
Shady
length.
Delenn.
You could trust her in the moment, but in the big picture, what's going to happen? And here it's like, oh, it's all laid out there.
Yeah.
And she has, as you said, been brought down a peg. And she's kind of in that Veer spot where, you really feel for her. Like, she's legitimately trying to do a good thing, but she has to earn trust. She has to prove herself, prove who she is.
Isn't there a line about doing the right thing for the wrong reasons from Linnea?
At some point, probably.
It's like it corrupts the whole thing, and that's part of the justification for why Delenn needs to go into this, and she needs to go in on her own.
Yes, when her and Linnea disagreed about what Kosh's motives were to do this at the very beginning of the doubt, and it's like, no, it's not that. And Linnea tries to go through basically what Sebastian is going to go through in the episode, and Delenn shuts it down, which is a nice
doubt or confirmation.
Yeah, the scene with Sheridan. In the
office,
at
the very beginning, when I love to where. It's very Minbari-ish, where Delenn's trying to explain in these really circular logic ways of why she needs the things to happen the way they do, and Sheridan just like, Delenn, I can help you out, but you gotta throw me a freaking bone here.
The issue is
Sheridan.
He has a really sweet line where it's just like, the issue's not with you asking.
Yeah, I like that line.
It's just like, you've earned the right to ask me for this. That's fine. But I want to understand.
Mm-hmm. And the Minbari, especially Delenn in the past, have been very much like the Vorlons, because they're very influenced by the Vorlons of understanding is not relevant for you right now. We understand and you don't have to. And it's part of making her open up to that change. And in a way, subliminally putting in the audience that kind of mentality isn't good. So when we do eventually show that the Vorlons have that fully and they're bad, we already knew this, because we have seen time and time again in the show that kind of we're right and we're doing it for your benefit and we don't have to inform you properly from
blindly
the Minbari
following.
And blindly following from the Minbari and from the Vorlon throughout the series is actually comes with many consequences, and that's pretty great. One aspect that I really appreciate about this interrogation is it is obviously within the text, but from a meta level, the deconstruction and criticism of the destined hero type character, because Delenn and Sheridan aren't personally my favorite characters, because they can fall into very often that the chosen one, the one who you turn, everyone turns
the
with
prophesized
you.
One, yeah,
and that can be troublesome for me. But Babylon
which is
5
why both of us get we enjoy, and I also hate the stuff that they do with Garibaldi, with him rejecting that idea when it comes to Sheridan.
Yeah, when he comes back from Sahadum with Lorien and he's like, I'm Jesus now, and Garibaldi's like, I don't like that. But no, to go back to this, what I appreciate about Babylon 5 is it's almost like it's aware that annoys me, and will routinely, when it's kind of annoying me, have a moment like this where it's like, no, Ryan, I agree with you, that is annoying. How about we roast Delenn about that, huh?
You have the audacity to presume that you are on a mission from God, embarked upon a holy cause. I don't believe it. And by the time you leave here, neither will you.
Well, definitely for these kind of, I know it's a sci-fi show, but it has elements of fantasy in it.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely in the fantasy genre, the whole prophesized chosen one can be a very contentious thing. And usually you would want to, especially these days, have an angle on it to make it a bit more interesting. I know that recently we did Space Sweepers on Spit and Polish, where we had a little discussion about that. It's like, oh, this film actually kind of had a chosen one, prophesized one plot, but it never used any of the terminology, and you only think about it in retrospect.
Yeah.
And that was refreshing. So when you do have all these very direct, lines of like prophesied chosen one, I think next season they even like outright say like, oh, you are the present of the past, present, future, or something like that.
Yeah, that was the Babylon 4.
Yeah, it is good to, like you say, deconstruct it, to actually interrogate the concept.
Intersections in real time, and it is fascinating on a looking back on the show too, the prophecy she goes off of is Valen's prophecy, which is what Sinclair knew.
Mm-hmm.
So that even undermines more so the chosen one, I am destined thing by just saying, no. It's because one guy literally knows history and just supplanted that in the public consciousness so that it becomes this thing. So it even undermines it more and more.
You end up seeing that the whole prophecy was just a motivator to get her in the
right place at the right time, like how the Vorlons want.
In the right state of mind, I was going to say.
Yeah, that
to really motivate her to move in this direction.
Yeah.
So it's in
cool.
retrospect, it's actually pretty good that this deconstruction thing happened, because then it sets you up for later.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, so this wasn't really like a holy thing. It was something that a man, pushed me to do. So now you can let go of it, kind of.
Yeah, and as a viewer, I like it because it does humble her and bring her back down to a more relatable character, because Babylon 5 has these bigger than life type people where they are movers and
intergalactic problems.
We are following ambassadors and soldiers, and we're not following the common folk in Babylon 5. So you need to have these things that bring them back to us, whether it's goofy things like Garibaldi likes Daffy Duck and Duck Dodgers and that, or you have a deconstruction of the character's driving force to be. That's how you do it. But also it is great on the in the level of what the Vorlons are all about, where they are all about the idea that everybody has a place, everybody belongs in a certain area of us. And what's really cool is, and I'm curious to get your views on this, is on a rewatch, you listen to all of Sebastian's questions and things, and you think back on the Vorlons kind of fail at most of these themselves because they've decided that they are right and that they are the chosen and that they are the ones to...
They are the ones to judge others. The criteria doesn't apply to them. They are the markers of...
Yeah, and they're not, because they're keeping their cards close to their chest, you don't have the room to, criticize them on things, but it's like, well, who knows what they have?
Yeah, right? They're older than us, so they must know and have more stuff going on behind them to back everything up. And yeah, I mean, what did you think about that kind of stuff looking back on this? Because, Bartek, you were obviously into B5 very much, and there is that turnaround of the Vorlons being like not in the show very much to now being very much in the show, and you're like, oh, they're good, right? And then, oh, no, they're not good? Okay. What do you think about that when it comes to this, when you revisit it, of the Vorlon ideology and how they are maybe not the best?
Refresh my memory on this part of Kosh. Was it kind of a twist in the end, or not twist, but was it kind of a thing in the end that like Kosh was the good one of the race?
Because he had ingratiated himself with the lower species.
Basically, he was the progressive one among the Vorlons.
He got contaminated culturally by others.
Yeah, who you can call
He went native.
Yeah, who you can call the good guy of the Vorlons. It is very interesting that, this very dark thing that happens is something that he decided on. It wasn't like the whole race. So it's just this little element of like, yeah, he's the good one. We find out in the end he was the good one, but he
was still shady. He
still went to this very dark place to get a message across.
Yeah,
basically.
And since he is our ambassador, he is the face of the Vorlons at this point too. Like, we will meet other ones and we will see him, Kosh, grow as a character and be challenged. But at this point, he hasn't grown in that way because he has had nothing to challenge him, nothing to change him. So at this point, he is villainous, but we don't really know that because he's so mysterious. But at the same time, he has literally killed people already. Remember Deathwalker? He got a shot out of the sky because you were not ready for immortality.
Very anti-hero.
We very parental. You do not do that. I tell you when to do that. You're not ready for that. But yeah, I just really appreciate just how on the big level, this is really telling you what the Vorlons are all about, and you don't realize it when you're first watching it. Maybe I didn't realize it, that the Vorlons are all about like order and your place, and just the extent of it is what really boggles the mind. But also, I don't know why I'm so surprised that their version of Mr. Mord, like their version of Mr. Mord, because that's kind of what he is, like their human emissary guy,
the representative
who asks their central question, is a serial killer. That kind of raises some red flags on where the Vorlons are fucking at. I'm just going to tell you that right now.
I was found by the Vorlons. They showed me the terrible depth of my mistake, my crimes, my presumption.
During all of this interrogation stuff, Sheridan gets involved. He gets smacked around.
Yeah. I liked that effect, by the way.
It was silly. I loved it. Where he smacked his cane down and a light of fire came at him.
Oh, no, I'm thinking of the whip effect that goes over his whole body.
When he's throwing
I really liked the fire one as well.
When Sebastian is like asking him so many questions in a row and he's just like beating him with his cane special effect. I thought, that is cool. And that was a great sequence of events.
Yes. But what was going to be your question?
Delenn and Sheridan physically embrace each other at the end. Were you wanting a kiss?
Yes. Yes, I was.
Rachel's always been very, I love these two. When are they gonna kiss? When watching their romance slowly build.
Get closer. There's those. No, that hug is getting tighter. It's just tighter. But
knowing that they do end up together, it is nice to see these little intimate moments.
Yeah, and I know it was frustrating you at the time, Rachel, that every time they physically embraced, it was like in amongst tragedy. Like last time, it was a whole species died, and she was like, "John, they're all dead," and then this one is like, "I'm being tortured, and I need to get out of here."
He nearly killed me.
On Sheridan's deathbed, who were like, "Did you know that guy was actually Jack the Ripper?"
Can we talk about that?
What?
Can we talk about that? I mean,
Sheridan dies, guys. Sorry.
He only has 20 years. Where do we land on it, people? Jack the Ripper. The reveal that Sebastian is in fact famous serial killer, almost like just pop culture character at this point. Jack the Ripper. What were your reactions to it when it first happened, Bartek?
I liked it.
Yeah?
Yeah, I did. It is a real life kind of mystery, what happened here, and the Babylon 5 comes along and says like, it was the Vorlons, their reach is that much. Again, and it goes back to what we were saying, our first impression of Sebastian, the cane, the walking, reveal that it's a human. And then it kind of reinforces that later on. It's like, not only is it a human, but it's someone who was in charge of, such a horrible thing back then. And it also gives you a payoff to when he was rapidly giving his backstory when he concluded with, and that's all I am willing to tell you. So if you have any more questions, fuck off. You can't get anything else. I just think it was really interesting. I like it.
Rachel?
I don't like it.
Rachel looked at me as she said that.
Bartek looked so sad. It's almost like you punched him.
I get it.
Arms are still crossed.
I get it. But it just distracts me too much. I'm like, it works. You set it up well. It makes sense, but it does not land with me very well. And I want to share with you what the Lurker's Guide gave the comment on with the JMS Speak section. On the Jack Sucks threads, phrased various ways, it doesn't really bother me. I knew going in that some folks would react well to that and some wouldn't. For an assessment of reasons, some valid, some less so. So, he knew that...
It's a choice. No, it's a choice.
It's a bold choice.
You're swinging.
It doesn't work for me entirely. I'm like, I get it, but I'm like, it's just a bit too much. Just a bit too much for me. Ryan?
When I first saw it happen and the guy looked at it was right up in front of the camera and he smiled and he says, "They only remember me as Jack." I remember laughing. I laughed and I laughed and I laughed because I was like, fucking really? And that's not even me saying that I didn't like it. It was more like, this fucking show. It's like, hey guys, here's a really, really unsettlingly creepy detail of the uprising of fascism on Earth. But also it's a show in which we have fucking Garibaldi and Walker Smith have a fight, and Jack the Ripper could visit the station too.
It's very silly,
It's just one of those things where I went, fucking really? Wow, this show can be crazy like this. But I like it, and it's mainly down to the performance. If the performance wasn't as good as it is, I wouldn't let it slide, I think. I think I would be in Rachel's camp, in which it's one of those...
If Jack the Ripper was played by that little girl telepath in season 1.
Oh my god, Elisa Belden, yeah. Yeah, imagine her saying, "Who are you?"
Unacceptable!
She was always asking questions in that episode too, in which when we did Legacies, we compared it to Snake in Metal Gear. In Metal Gear Solid, he's always asking questions. It's like, Metal Gear. And she's just like, telepaths?
I was going to say, when you get around to playing Revengeance, you might find the Jack thing a bit funnier.
But it's his performance that solidifies it for me. I would be in Rachel's camp. I get kind of rolling my eyes of, in sci-fi, in fantasy, in certain places, there is this kind of love for Arthurian legend, or Victorian era, or steampunk, or Jack the Ripper. And I just go, oh, really? Star Trek's had Jack the Ripper, in which they revealed that Jack the Ripper was an energy being, ghost, alien. And I just go, oh, for fuck's sake, must we? And he possesses the actor who voiced Piglet. Mm-hmm. So you get to hear the actor who voiced Piglet, who sounds like Piglet naturally, start like raving about wanting to murder prostitutes, and it's one of the best things ever. But
I've seen an anime where Jack the Ripper is a little girl who murders prostitutes because she wants to get back in the womb. Really?
I know in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, he's like a zombie that gets controlled by another character, the zombie Jack the Ripper. But no, once you put Jack the Ripper in, it can be very campy. You go, well, we've crossed the line into Goofy territory, but I love when...
It does do it at the right at the end.
I mean, it cuts immediately to the credits.
But it makes you laugh about the whole 45 minutes that you just watched. Where it's like, remember when Sheridan talked to Jack the Ripper and he had a cane?
It pushes it over the edge for me, is that final line. Like, I'm just like, oh, I could forgive this right up until that point. For some reason, it just tips it over into like, I get it, but I don't approve, and my approval means absolutely fucking nothing.
No, your opinions matter, Rachel. JMS is writing the reboot. He's listening to this, and he says, well, and he crosses out Jack appears again in the reboot because, and then writes next to it, Rachel doesn't like that.
He's like, make sure to ask Bartek what that anime was.
Rutsuki Doji. Legend of the Demon Womb.
I would change the ending to, he would still have the lines like, I remember me as Jack. And then he'll start walking away and you're like, by the way, Sheridan, that room was actually on grey 20. And Sheridan like, what? What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. And like, look, anything can happen. We are, after all, still inside.
And remember, me being Jack the Ripper allows the audience to momentarily believe that King Arthur visits the station next season because we've set up that people from the past can be in this show and mythical figures. Bye-bye. And then he leaves. And then Michael York walks past him and says, you there! And they start British accenting off at each other. And then that's the end of the episode. It's just both of them being like, I actually am British. And Wayne Alexander being like, but don't you like my British accent? And which is just me lilting.
JMS accidentally called Wayne Alexander actually British. And I'm like, oh, he's American.
No, he isn't. Well,
he fooled people into thinking that he was actually British. Like the British viewers didn't pick it.
Wow.
And then just to repeat what I said in our first episode, also put this dialogue into the opening of season 5.
yeah, I put this exact dialogue. And being like, only Jack. Well, let's get into the spotlight section in which we talk about an actor who appeared. Obviously, we're talking about Wayne Alexander, who played Sebastian or Jack. We're going to go over his performance. We all think it's pretty great. I think we're all in agreement on that, at least, right, Rachel?
Yes.
And we'll go over what we know him from, any interesting facts along the way. Bartek, hit us up. What do you think about this guy? Anything you want to elaborate further on? Any specific moments in the episode that you thought were really good, or something that leapt out at you when it comes to Sebastian?
Well, like you said, you mentioned before the thing about how when you rewatch it, you see like, oh, this is the Vorlon ideology here all along. We just didn't realize it at the time. On his own personal end, like we mentioned already that there was already a bit of a setup early on where he was looking down at the woman with the cleavage and it's like, oh, Jack the Ripper kills prostitutes because they're immoral or whatever. There was a sort of logic to what he was saying in the interrogations, like the whole, who are you? Can you only refer to yourself as titles? Things like that. You do get the sense of like, okay, I know sort of what answers he's looking for. And there is this sort of like surprisingly reasonable level. Like when Delenn does admit that she's had doubts, he's like, oh, like
good.
Very pleasantly surprised. Like there is hope for you after all. I will give you a 10-minute break.
That break feels like it's more for him because he's thrown off by that. He really wasn't prepared.
I felt like it was like a little, like a treat for her.
Yeah, I didn't get too much of a sensation that it was a break for him. I felt like there was a sort of, it was a sort of tactic.
What do I do now?
Wow,
she actually admitted it. What do I do?
In Rachel's Avenue, there is certain moments in his performance you can tell in which he's genuinely surprised, but also pleased that, oh, I'm finally getting one.
Oh,
because I've been doing this for 400.
Able to fucking die. They might let me die now.
I've been doing this for 400 years and I found no one.
Later on, when Sheridan enters the thing, we didn't mention that the part of the interrogation was Sheridan had to join in. And when Sheridan was. No, sorry, it was Delenn. When he was doing the whack, whack, whack thing on Sheridan, then Delenn, piped up in the background and he was like, you don't move. And then she was still moving and talking. Like, he was very, like, interested in what she was saying. Like, yes, go on. He was basically saying, yes, go on. Get to the answer, to the answer kind of thing. Like, there was this very enthusiastic part of him.
Exhilaration.
Yeah. And it kind of does go back to the fact that he's representing the faction of the Order.
I really loved with his performance, it's in the eyes and the face, but you get this real sense underneath all of the flamboyancy and evil and eloquent speaking and all of that he's this tortured soul himself.
Oh yeah, he had that line where it's like, when the Vorlons took me, they showed me
the error of my ways, or like how wrong I was.
He had a more. I think this was when he was still talking to Sheridan at the beginning, like a bit more of a vague line about they showed me unspeakable things that changed everything about me.
I was found by the Vorlons, taken, transported, and brought into their service. They told me everything about everything, and the scales fell from my eyes, and they were open to a universe of majesty and terror that you could never imagine. They call upon me when I am needed, and preserve me when I am not. And they have called upon me now for this interrogation.
A part of the frustration he has with interviewing people like Delenn is he himself failed the test. He himself thought he was the chosen and that he was doing something right and that he wasn't. And that the Vorlons are fucking him over for thinking otherwise. And it's just, I loved Wayne Alexander's performance. It's the eyes. It's really in those eyes. The eyes
was a big one, yeah.
And that's one of his strengths as an actor. When I think of him, I think of how his eyes are, because he plays multiple characters in B5 and it's his voice, of course, but his eyes. When I think of Lorien, I think of those kind, gentle eyes, but also he's always thinking, that character. What's Lorien thinking? He's got something going on. And then when he's the Druck, those evil, beady eyes in that one, and on it goes. But I was just really drawn to him. He had just this feeling like he is this tortured creature that is just wanting relief. And that he can communicate that whilst also being the powerful one in the scenario is just great, because that's what Delenn starts picking at as she goes along. Rachel, what about you? Wayne Alexander, what are your thoughts on him?
I adore each of his performances. He is in a number of B5 things. It's a long list. But I adore his performance as Sebastian. I can't imagine anybody else being in this role and anybody else being nearly as good as he is. It feels untouchable in terms of its quality.
Evidently it was so good that they wanted to bring him back in other performances. I mean, he appears so many more times as different characters, and he's great every time. It's hard for me to even choose a favorite. I mean, this one stands out because it's a whole episode of him just acting his ass off in front of you. And the other ones, he's like his supporting characters in them. But, he plays Lorien. He plays, in the next interrogation episode we do, he plays the Drazi.
JMS said we wanted to give him more to do. That's why he comes back as Lorien.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, he evidently gave so much that this is one of those people where you go, why waste it? Let's have him back in again. I mean, personally, my favorite is his performance as the Drock. He's only like 1 or 2 episodes as that, but that's my personal favorite. I really love his voice in that way. He's almost like this breathless, whispering, serpent-like creature in that. But yeah, Bartek, I mean, were you aware, or did you have to look up how many times Wayne Alexander would continue to appear in this show?
Well, of course, yeah. The only 2 that really, the names that I recognize were, obviously Sebastian and Lorien. I think at first I mixed up Lorien with Naroon. I'm like, no, that was a different guy. But then Lorien, he's like the god guy, yeah.
The one with the long fingers.
Yeah, but the rest of them, I would need to be pushed a bit further to remember, specifically who he was.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
You want me to go through them?
We'll give it a go.
Give it a go. The Drock one you'll definitely remember once it's described to you.
Mm-hmm.
So we have Sebastian, of course.
Don't remember.
We have a nun called Gadan.
I don't remember the Narn one as well.
Let me take a look at it. So one of the Narn meeting with Jakar when he goes back to Narn. He's on the planet.
Oh, that's the one where he goes to kill Reefer.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great episode.
Oh, yes, Rock.
Because I was going to say the name of the episode.
Yeah.
The
Lorien.
So Lorien, Narn Gadan in, and the Rock cried out, no hiding place. He's also in a Drazi.
He plays a Drazi in the next interrogation episode when Sheridan is taken, and he's got that one, and he's trying to boost that Drazi spirits up, but then the Drazi's a fucking piece of shit.
I remember, yeah.
and it's Wayne Alexander again. It's like, hey guy, I'm back at the next interrogation episode soon. Bye.
And JMS pointed out that he really liked the symmetry of that. The Drazi. Yep, so he's there as the Drazi, he's there as the Drock in season 5, Movements of Fire and Shadow, and The Fall of Centauri Prime.
So here's
the 2 that he's in.
He's the one that basically is like, hey Londo, remember the Shadows? I'm their servant, and we're here now on Centauri Prime, and you're going to be my slave. I'm going to put my keeper on you, and you're going to willingly put it on you.
I remember something like that.
I'm a shadow of a shadow. I've been the one controlling the Regent here. And the Regent's like, yeah, dude, you just got to give yourself up or else they'll bomb the planet and everyone's dead. And he's just quietly in the corner while Londo gives his tyrannical speech above the city.
Yeah.
He's so fucking good at that.
He appears in 2 of the TV movies.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
One of them as a Drock again.
Oh, cool.
He's in A Call to Arms. And then he is in The River of Souls as one of the souls.
Oh, not a soul hunter. I would have given him the role of a soul hunter. He would have been great. I looked over Wayne Alexander's stuff. He's one of those guys where he doesn't seem to have done too much TV or movie work.
He's got like 22 credits.
And they're all kind of small roles. Like, hey, he's TV reporter in this, or friendly man in Becca or whatever. And so I don't really know him as an actor outside of this series.
His biggest film role, he seems to be known for Babylon 5 and then for a cult sci-fi classic. If Ryan, you want to talk about that one?
No, you tell me about it. It's not leaping off the top of my brain, unfortunately.
So the other role that he's known for, which I like in his bio, it was described as a cult classic thanks to its popularity on college campuses.
Okay.
Which is really specific. It's Spaced Invaders, where he plays a kind of nerdy, geeky...
Really?
I remember seeing the name of the filmography, but...
Gas attendant that's dressed up as Zorro for Halloween, and then he gets taken over by the aliens and given like Zorro like powers apparently or something like that.
Oh, it's got the little girl from Jurassic Park and Tremors in it. So there you go. It's a real film. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a lot of stuff going on. Was anything on your end, Bartek, looking into this guy that piqued your interest?
It said, I only looked at his Wikipedia entry, and like the little biography said that his career started off as a choreographer for fight scenes.
Well, that was after he did a stint at a theatre company where I think at some stage he described it as trial by fire, and then into learning what it was like to be in theatre, and then he moved into fight choreography.
Really?
And I really like thinking back on his performance because his movement is
physical.
so deliberate.
I didn't know that. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think the little paragraph also ended just by saying like, oh, later on in his career he moved from film to TV mostly, so it was early on front load with films, later on just TV stuff.
Yeah.
And in terms of what I've seen him in, I've seen him as Jack the Ripper and Jack Shit.
No, okay.
Obviously Babylon 5's it. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So you didn't watch Becca?
No, and I haven't seen Frasier, I think was one of the things
Frasier.
he was
Or
in.
that episode of The Twilight Zone.
Frasier. The Twilligat Zone.
But no, he's great. He's a very key essential player in Babylon 5. It's one of those... Oh, Wayne Alexander, I mean, him and Babylon 5 go together. He plays so many important little roles. I mean, Lorian's definitely a very important character in the final episode, especially when he pops back up. But yeah, he's great. I love the guy. I don't know too much about him. I know he's done some interviews on other Babylon 5 related things, so people can check those out to hear his kind of takes. But it's just cool to me that he was just this actor who doesn't have the largest catalog of work in terms of TV and film, came in, gave a really good audition, evidently, and then they just liked him so much they're like, keep coming back, keep coming back, keep coming back. It's just really great.
I would like to give some further background information and maybe a few fun facts about Mr. Alexander. So he did a lot of theatre, I think.
You don't say.
Yes.
I doubt it.
A lot of Shakespeare and classic theatre.
Nah.
I would love to see him and the guy who played I would love to see him and the guy who played Naroon do Shakespeare at each other.
That
And Jinxo.
oh
No, don't do it.
And the girl, the telepath girl.
To be or not to be.
That is the question.
So I was looking at his old website, and I think there was almost 40 theatre productions that were listed.
Show off.
But he's played Hamlet, Romeo, Banquo, a few of the other main characters or central characters in other Shakespeare's, like Twelfth Night as well.
Okay.
But was he ever Oberon? I was Oberon once.
Are you Wayne Alexander?
Well, I don't know if he's done Oberon.
Well,
so for a time he was going back and forth between LA and New York, but he didn't like how pompous the people in New York were.
It's really going into the Jack the Ripper role, yes.
He's just like, God, they've got to stick up their asses about being an actor in New York.
They're immoral, gotta kill them.
I really like the idea of him sitting in his Jack the Ripper outfit, drinking a wine and bitching about how pretentious those New Yorkies are. And just, they love acting so much. Ugh.
Yeah, so he did a few things over in New York. He only has one Broadway credit, which was he was an understudy in A Streetcar Named Desire, I think it was.
For whom?
I can't remember.
Would he be Stanley?
No, he would have been the baby.
He could have been his friend, Mitch. Mitch?
The one who's like, oh, my mother.
Yeah.
Do you want me to
I could see him doing that. No, it's fine. I'm going to assume that he's one of his friends, probably.
Would you want to see him as Sebastian on Sesame Street?
Yeah. Him and, but he has to be with the Count.
See, I was thinking more a scene like, because, on Sesame Street, they kind of like parody things.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to parody the torture scene. He's got Elmo up like Sheridan, and then he says to him like, "What is you? What is you?" And then Cookie Monster stumbles in. It's like, "Wait, you mean, you mean to say, what are you?" And he's like, "No, what is you? Because this episode is brought to you by the letter U." That kind of thing.
And the final player in our little drama arrives at last.
What are we going to rate this episode on our impervious system of Yum being bad or Yum Yum being good?
Yeah, it tasted pretty good.
Okay, so that's Bartek's rating. It tasted pretty good, which is weird because we don't
Tasted pretty good.
Tasted pretty good. Oh, Seth Rogen, you joined us. It
Tasted pretty good. I'm Pumbaa.
I'm Pumbaa. In all seriousness, what do you give this, Bartek? Yum or Yum Yum?
It's Yum Yum.
Yum yum.
I'm on the same boat. Yum Yum.
Yum yum.
Yum yum.
Yum yum.
Rachel, what are we going to be talking about next time on Babylon
The
5?
Fall of Night.
On the next Babylon 5.
Earth reacts to the Centauri's rapid invasion of several worlds, but not with what Sheridan was expecting.
Sounds like a little comedy film. It's like, but he didn't expect Mom to tag along.
Meanwhile, Jakar cooks up a funny food for his in-laws.
Amazing revelations are made about the shadows and the Vorlons.
Wait, Rachel.
They're Mom's ex-lovers.
Wait, Rachel, did you read that correctly? Could I see it for a second? Where's the Kefir? This is Kefir's big episode. There's no description about Warren Kefir.
Everyone, Ryan said he's going to...
It's a surprise, Brian!
Oh, it's a twist.
Ryan said he's going to get me back on once per season of the show. I can't believe he didn't get me on for the only season Kefir was in for one of his episodes.
You were crying. Hey, look, there were so many Kefir episodes to choose. It's actually quite surprising we got you on for one that he wasn't in, because we know that he's in the opening credits, so you did get him at least his face.
At least
a glimpse.
It's okay. At least I got a Londo episode. Oh, wait!
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. And
now,
you won't get one next time either. I'll just keep giving you no Londo, and then you can say, Ryan, my favorite character is Londo, who you won't let me talk about.
Well, I know season 4 I'm already booked in for a non-Londo episode, and it's one of my favorite episodes too.
So stop crying. Stop crying, baby.
So now,
baby boy Bartek, stop crying.
All right, well, that's it. I'm going to show you another interrogation then.
Oh, no.
You said earlier this episode that this is the penultimate episode. Only one more after this for the season. But have you considered the post-season episode where you discuss the season?
Well, that's different. That's kind of like...
So you're raising the stakes. You're changing the goalposts, are you? Oh, God. What did you have for dinner last night, Ryan?
I actually... Do you want to know what I actually had for dinner last night?
Tell me what you had for dinner.
I had a Sloppy Joe burger that was delivered to us upside down in the box. So all of the sauce had pooled, and the top of the bun was basically
and by
nothing.
sauce, he means mustard.
Because it was sloppy.
Mustard was the only condiment used on this burger for some reason, and it was smothered in it.
And Bartek, everyone loves great quantities of mustard, the earwax of condiments. That's what you want in great quantities.
Interesting. But what did you have the night before that?
Well, that's an even better question, Bartek. I had lasagna, like Garfield.
Lasagna?
No.
Let me see your hands for a second, right? They're not messy. Where's the lasagna sauce that you would have eaten it with?
He hasn't washed since then?
So you did eat the lasagna, you washed your hands, but you ate it with your hands, just picked
Bartek,
it up.
I have a question for you. Do you...
Answering a question with a question. Go on.
No, I just have a question for you. Do you have anything you want to plug at the end of this? Do you want to tell anyone where the pod is?
You ask me that knowing my answer is my own podcast, Spit and Polish Presents, hosted by me and you, Ryan Sliwinski, and I'm Bartek Kasprzak. I should have said that also. We release an episode every Tuesday.
Australian
our time, of course. If you're in America, it might be Monday.
We don't give a shit about your time. It's our time that we're on, okay?
Yes, unless you're an American guest with us, in which case we'll have to care for a little bit.
But that podcast can be found on your usual places, Spit and Polish Presents. We can also be found on your usual podcasting sites and social medias under YumYumPod or YumYumPodcast. You can email us with your questions, queries, thoughts, concerns, or whatever you feel like at yumyumpod@gmail.com. We would love it if you could rate and review the show on whatever site you listen on. It would be nice. I would like it if you did that, please.
Ryan won't look like Jakar in the elevator if you do it.
Yeah, that's the thumbnail for my promotion. Is like Via is you when you haven't reviewed the pod. Me as Jakar being like, please review the pod.
He'll be Jakar when he's with women.
Yeah,
or when he's just finished fighting with King Arthur.
Or when he's just had when he had sex with Londo's wife.
Or when he's learning about Daffy Duck.
There you go. But that is all we've got for you. Jakar didn't show up here. Didn't say anything. Now I know he did, but he didn't show up in this room to say the words that I'm gonna say that ends the episode. But I'll say them because he wasn't brave. He was too busy bandaging up that wound on his hand to say good eating to you.
Good eating to you.
Good eating to you, Jakar?
Rachel, he's already left.